Welcome to Let's Talk Democracy. I'm Tina Johnson, your host. Join me as we talk to the people on the front lines, the change makers and activists who are building a stronger, healthier democracy for all of us. Whether you're looking for expert advice, a new perspective, or just a little inspiration, this is where you'll find it. Today, I'm joined in conversation by political strategist Blair Talmadge. Before we begin, I want to apologize for the slightly challenging audio quality in some parts of our conversation. Despite the technical issues, the insights are too valuable not to share, so thank you for bearing with us. In today's episode, Why We Vote Against Ourselves, we are going to dive deep into a critical question. Why are voters increasingly choosing to be led by their emotions rather than by sound policy? We will explore the complex shift in the American political landscape, highlighting how the response to events like the assassination of Charlie Kirk can be used to drive emotional narratives. We will also discuss whether the Democratic Party can effectively counter the powerful emotional rhetoric that seems to be winning elections. It's a conversation you don't want to miss. Let's get into it. Hey, Blair, thanks for joining me today. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I am as well.
I think the last time we were in each other's presence was when I was running for office in, I think, 2012 or 2013 in Chester, Pennsylvania.
It was a great race against power and the way things have always been done in Chester. It's funny how people will keep supporting candidates that have turned out bad results that have proven to do detriment to the society that they live, but they continue to elect them. It's more of a microcosm of what's afflicted the United States of America with the people who they put in office. I'm hoping that people will find the error of the ways and choose government that really works for them.
After that election, there have been several primaries. I was the first primary ever in the history of the city. And that the power dynamic, the power structure there did eventually change. It took a while, more than 30 years for that change. But I think to your point that the political landscape of what voters are willing to accept from their politicians has to shift. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today is I know that you're not a political scientist, but you are a political strategist. And you think through these issues and you do a lot of work on the ground in communities. And I wanted to have this conversation because the political landscape in the United States has changed since I ran for office. A question for you to think about with me is how has the political landscape in the U.S. changed over the past decade?
Well, I think you have to go back a little further than the last decade. I think at least in my lived experience, you have to go back to maybe you have to go back to Reagan. I think you have to go back to the election of Ronald Reagan. He's the one who really got the ball rolling to where the Republicans could get to the Tea Party, and from the Tea Party was birthed this MAGA movement. It harkens back to, I guess, what they consider the good old days. And the good old days, I guess, are good for some people, but not necessarily for folks who look like us. And they've been successful in defining a lot of things that are contradictory, I guess, in a sense, to religion. The one thing they can always talk about is God, and feeling that God hasn't ordained. The United States has constantly tried to say that they're governed by laws and things of that nature, but in the background, they want to say it's a Christian state. Whatever term that they feel is beneficial to them. A lot of fringe concepts that are not amenable to the Christian religion. That has attracted a lot of sentiments amongst even Democrats or people who are on the edge of being Democrat or Republican. It's pulled a number of people over to their side of thinking. Once you get them in at a certain point, it's easier to keep them in. These fringe issues, it has really helped them gain support amongst people who may have found themselves in the middle.
When I ran, and I know as a voter that policy was always the issue. I ran on a platform for prison reform, stronger education, support financially from the state, access to health care. I ran on policies. I ran on issues that really mattered to the constituents that I wanted to represent from the conversations I'd had with them. And fast forward to today, it's less about policy and governance and more about how people feel. In the last season, we had Professor Mark Wallace from Swarthmore College talking about the role of religion and how it's evolved over time, from the time of Jesus till present day Christianity, and then how religion overall has started to play this broader role in the political environment or landscape in the US in particular. And I'm for me, it's an interesting thing because the way it's shaping the landscape, it's shaping it away from the things that really matter as far as governance is concerned. Colonizers of the United States colonized it from England for religious freedom so that you could worship freely and be governed separately from your religious beliefs. I mean, therefore, we have the separation of church and state. Now we're pushing this ideology around extreme Christian values and views that undermine constitutional governance and principles that make the United States democracy accessible to everyone.
Well, everybody would like to consider themselves being religious. Religion runs across political ideologies. Let's say, you're a Democrat in the labor movement. You fight for union rights. You fight for better wages, for better working conditions. There was a commercial that talked about approving sex changes for prisoners. The one thing that I know about elections are emotional, all right? When you go into that booth, your emotions dictate who you vote for, and not necessarily what you know is right and wrong. So one thing about elections and politics, it's who wins your emotions. That's where Democrats lose people. They try to win people on policy. Policy doesn't make people emotional. Things that affect religion are emotional. Policies are not emotional.
If your emotions is what drive your voting, and your emotions are allowed to then dictate the constitutional rights and access to constitutional rights to other people, there is conversation that needs to be had around what then is the separation of church and state. Because church and state is not meant to say your beliefs should dictate governance. Church and state are separate.
Tell me the last time you've heard a person running for office that didn't believe in God. The values that would be for a good Christian. You won't hear a person saying that they don't believe in God is because they don't want to trigger people's emotions to work negatively against them. If you don't believe in God, then you can't be leading me. Even though there's a separation of church and state and everything else, a person's belief in, I mean, you got to wonder if you believe in God, how could there ever been slavery in the United States for 300 years?
And it's obvious that the manipulation of Christian values and principles were used and manipulated to oppress people. And slavery, being the most recent horrific expression of that manipulation, is not the first time that it's been used. And you look at the Crusades in Europe and how it was used against farmers or poor people to go out and fight wars that were senseless and only benefit to the Catholic Church at the time. If we look at today's upheaval and the war against the Palestinians waged by Israel under the guise of religious persecution and religious right, you know that there again is a manipulation of the state acting on behalf of its citizens in the name of religion, when in fact it cannot be explained or excused by any principles found in the Torah or any other scriptures. I had a great conversation with Zolal Habibi last week around democracy in Iran. And even in the Islamic State of Iran, they use persecution, torture, and under the guise of religion to oppress people who want to have a democracy and want to live for free, who want to live freely in their countries. I think it's more accurate to say that religion has been weaponized against people who believe or have a faith in God. And it's been weaponized against them so that they themselves weaponize the system that is supposed to govern them against their own self-interest. And that to me is something that is very problematic.
We are a young democracy in comparison to others, still kind of young. There are going to be ebbs and flows, winners and losers. The civil rights era, that brought on a lot of change, and it flowed and then it ebbs. Now it's ebbing now, starting with Ronald Reagan. And then you get to elect Barack Obama. You have a person like Donald Trump who really doesn't have he doesn't have any religious beliefs. Nobody believes him when he holds a Bible. He held the Bible upside down. He didn't even have enough sense to hold it right side up. He'll just use whatever tool available to him to further his political ambitions. That's what makes him really dangerous, because he has galvanized the people on the religious right, and not just the religious right, a lot of people in the religious middle who believe in God. He can't be judged by his opposition as being a religious fanatic. Because when you're judged as a religious fanatic, then you get marginalized. So he's in a position where he can not be marginalized because he embodies the feeling of a lot of people who can see things in a different way. Put it this way, like I have good friends. I had great friends, and they support Donald Trump. And I'm saying, like, how could a friend of mine support somebody who fought to get young black kids in New York convicted?
Do you think that the economy at some point will really shift and take hold of the way in which the voter looks at how and what government should be doing for them? Are they gonna ever get emotional about cost of eggs, the cost of gas? They're ever gonna get emotional about the fact that they can't afford the lives that they have?
I don't know if you've been paying attention to the New York mayoral race, but the Democratic candidate, he's talking about bread and butter issues. In New York, the dollar is more important, at least New York City, takes precedence over religious concerns. religious concerns, at least in some communities, it doesn't trump your ability to take care of your family, your ability to feed yourself and your family, and provide shelter for your family. In places where the cost of living isn't detrimental to your well-being, then religion is going to go ahead and take a bigger. I mean, let's face it. The truth of the matter is that welfare is utilized by more white Americans than black Americans. However, the way it's played in the media is that just about every black person is on welfare. And you'll find people in Appalachia who will go ahead and vote against their interests.
There was a study some time ago, I can't remember how many years back, but they asked the same series of questions around who should receive welfare. And everything was exactly the same. The only difference was the racial dynamic. And so if it was a white man who was not college educated with a family of 4 and unemployed, should they receive welfare? And the response by the survey participants was yes. But then when you added in the racial component of them being black, it was no. I think it goes back to this notion of where we are currently in U.S. democracy, is that if the U.S. democracy is this idea or ideal that it only benefits white people, how can you combat that narrative? You have the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Now that's been elevated as a martyrdom of a religious leader or, a religious activist into this sphere of being worshipped, I'll use the term. And then that compels movement towards we need to do more to secure and to make safe an ideology that protects this group of people. After the assassination, the community that was attacked first or threatened first were all historically black colleges and universities. In response to his assassination, before people knew that the person who actually shot and killed him was a white man. Again, it's sort of this idea around, yes, we can go back to religion, but it's this idea that the economy means something in New York. It means something in Chicago. It means something in Philly. It means something in places where people have more access to diversity of thinking and diversity of cultures and identities and perspectives, where you can see that the world that you're living in works really well because there is this diversity of everything versus communities where it's homogenous and the idea is that we're good by ourselves. We're good just with ourselves. And so the things that should matter, and that's why I'm wondering about the economy, because it is really a basic tenet of governance. It's how well your government is governed determines how well your economy is doing. Much as people say it's the economy, stupid, when you're running for office. I talked about this with Jim Boyce, an economist, last season, where yes, it's the economy, stupid, but it really isn't the economy stupid now. These are the things that should be moving people more towards saying we want to make sure that we have an economic framework that supports the American dream. We want an economic structure and system that we feel allows us to save for the future of our children. And all of these things are being pushed to the wayside as people fill it with this emotional need to say trans people shouldn't have access to bathrooms. Desensitizing people towards the things that they should make priorities to ensure that the way in which they want to be governed are being done by the people that you elect into office. Where's the opportunity for them to gain back this narrative, even if they have the emotions that are attached to it?
Uh, I don't think it really applies to uh, people in the religious right because I think they'd have a different terminology for it. They probably say it's your soul or religion, stupid, and your religious ferocity towards bringing God in the center of our life and in the center of our politics. We're making this guy who got assassinated a martyr, and most people never heard of him. Most people never heard of him. Not that he was a nobody, but he he was just a soldier. The rank idolized, and come on, he's 70,000 people coming to his funeral. Come on, 70,000 people didn't even know him. It's great marketing.
I mean, that's the problem. It's all great marketing. How do you counter that, this marketing? And also, I think marketing is one of the greatest evil in the world, and it's used all the time against us, and we just don't pay attention.
How do you counter it? That's a $64,000 question. Put it this way: Donald Trump will be considered a guy has balls. Right? He has balls. None of the Democrats who either ran for president or became president really pushed their agenda. Uh, Maybe they didn't have an agenda. Maybe their agenda was let's make everybody happy. Let's have good employment.
I hear often, well, the Democrats don't have an agenda. And it's like, but they do. And they do a lot of stuff and they get a lot done. Reducing the cost of prescription medication for people, reducing the cost of insulin for diabetics to $6 a vial. Now I think it's something like $1,000 a vial. So if the agenda is to disrupt and destroy, then yes, you're right. The Trump and the Republicans have an agenda. He has the balls to do that, as you say. But if the governance process and structure is supposed to improve the lives of the citizens who contribute their tax dollars to the government to do that, then the Democrats do have a plan and an agenda. Maybe they're not articulating it the right way. Maybe it's not being put out or marketed the right way. And maybe that gets back to my earlier point, like how do they counter the marketing approach? And I think the marketing for the Democrats, they're a little bit, maybe Scandinavian about it, where they don't want to be seen as being braggadocious. But I think that the Democrats need to spend more time saying, this is what we've done. This is what we're doing. This is how your medical costs have gone down. This is how we're making sure you have access to quality health care. I think not going out and saying, look at us, or signing their big signature to everything and this thinking we serve the people isn't working for the Democrats. Because if blowing your horn gets you into office, then the Democrats need to blow their horn because they're actually doing something.
Therein lies the reason why we don't win. Because we like elections because we know there are winners and losers. When everybody's winning, there are no losers, no identifiable losers. That doesn't engender emotion. Getting back to the emotional part of politics.
It doesn't engender emotions, but then that's the question. I know it doesn't engender emotions, and if it doesn't engender emotions, then what do people really want? What does the voter really want? Because on the one hand, the voter is saying, I want a government that works for me. I want to have quality of life. I want to be able to afford this. So all the things they're saying they want, and actually all the things that they're getting right now, it's the opposite of what they said they want. Why is there an emotional satisfaction to being hoodwinked by the Trump administration versus policies that actually are doing the things that you say that you want a government to do on your behalf? And because you don't feel the emotional, mental exhaustion, somehow you believe that it's not really working for you.
That takes us back to the beginning of this conversation. And we started this conversation off talking about how we met and, the campaign that 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 you mounted, and the fact that the people in Chester would rather continue to support people they know that weren't any good for them. But some point in time, they can say, well, yeah, I know him. We go to high school together. His father was a Mason. Here comes this kid who's talking about policies and everything, which isn't emotional. It goes back to what is it that motivates people to vote, and they vote on emotions, and there is nothing emotional about the Inflation Reduction Act. You could bring the price of gas down to 55 cents. It's not emotional. So you ask, how can we, I guess we being the Democrats, win? We have to win on emotion. Just the same. And how do we go about doing things? I don't, I don't know the exact answer to that, but, you know, it's going to have to be uh, framing issues in a way that people will feel that they are number one winning and someone is losing. Somebody's winning,
So
we're winning, we're winning, they're losing. Whoever they are, they can be immigrants, they can be transgender folks, they can be gay, they could be left-handed people. But somehow we gotta win and they gotta lose.
Blair, is that from your perspective the way in which it's always been? Someone loses, someone wins, and how you market that, how you communicate that will resonate with voters emotionally.
Well, put it this way. The way I've done campaigns for the most part is how you win. By voting for this person, how you win. I never really had the campaigns where we can show how you win and they lose. But it's more about people's self-interest. And their self-interest has to be in winning. And how perhaps not electing this person will make you a loser, or you will lose on these issues. That's a lot what campaigns do. The Republicans galvanize it as how you win and how somebody else loses, how you can advance off of somebody else's hardship. They're called wedge issues.
We're gonna lose, but then, to your point, and this is the problem I have, is that you can decide we're going to say who's gonna win, who's going to lose. In this example of migrant workers who are the ones picking the harvest for the foods that will go on the global market, that will end up on our shelves in our grocery stores, that deporting them, making it impossible for them to enter the country to do this job, they lose, the US economy loses, the consumer loses. There's no win here. And yet, people still vote for the deportation of these people. So just the logic there of choosing, identifying, and then marketing to winners and losers. In this instance, and this is where the opportunity is that people realize, okay, we voted for this and we said we're going to be the ones that win, but actually we're the ones losing. Prices have gone up, farmers are suffering, we've made it impossible to be competitive on the global market with any products or produce that we have coming out of the United States from the agricultural communities that serve the global market, because we voted for ourselves to win, when in fact, by voting for ourselves, we voted against ourselves. Perhaps this is one of those instances where people will realize that they voted against their own self-interest. One could only hope that this would be like an aha moment. Oh, this is what is meant when people say voting against your own self-interest. By voting against immigrants, we voted against ourselves, reducing our global percentage of products on the global market to almost nothing and losing a share of the agricultural market because we refuse to let people come in and do what they've been doing for generations. There's winners and there's losers. There are winners and there are losers. That's the way it works. But the question for me is always, in a democracy, isn't it about how we push forward the overarching benefits of a society for the majority of us, for the betterment of us, versus pushing forward an agenda for the emotional side of us that has very little to do with what is in the best interest of the majority perspective on the way in which we want to live in the world, that we say that we respect and believe in freedoms and rights and humanity and opportunities. That has to be something that comes out of this, other than there's winners and there's losers.
You've asked the $64,000 question. Why do people vote against their self-interest? I don't know the answer to that question. We talked earlier about poor white folks in Appalachia voting against policies against their best interest in getting more assistance or to refrain from losing assistance, voting that it'll hurt Black people more. We used to talk about one man, one vote. That's democratic. That's democracy. One man, one vote. If it was one man, one vote, George Bush wouldn't have been in office. If it was one man, one vote, the other Bush wouldn't have been in office. I mean, we won the plurality of when the plurality of except for the last election, Trump won the plurality for the first time in like 20 years that Republican has won. Do this electoral politics. That's not democracy.
Is that an opportunity for change?
It is. But we got to find a Democratic leader who is going to go ahead and fight for that. When we had control of the Congress and the Senate, when we had it for a little while. We didn't go for the jugular. We tried to be Mr. Nice Guy and call ourselves governing fairly. We didn't want to upset the apple cart. They don't care about upending the apple cart. They don't care. They will do it. In Texas and Tennessee, how they're trying to change the redistricting, and it's not in year 5. It's supposed to be every time the census is done. You go through redistricting, but look, they don't care. They want to win at any cost. I think that Democrats have to win at any cost because we're facing an adversary who doesn't care. They will do everything possible to win, and we have to have the same resolve. That's going to turn into, we don't know, the next civil war or something, but we have to match their energy.
You sound like Governor Newsom, and I do think matching energy is very important, but I hope that we don't match it to a civil war because I don't think it's necessary. And you said it already, maybe the term emotions, it's winning hearts and minds, and I think that that's the question. It's how do you win back hearts and minds? How do you take back the narrative? How do you push forward in a way that resonates with people? And I think that that's the ongoing conversation. If you could change one thing to strengthen American democracy, what would it be?
Get rid of the electoral system. Get rid of the electoral college. And force elected officials to talk to all the people. Get rid of the electoral college, and that'll stop a lot of politicians governing small majorities. It'll force them to be more populist.
Thank you for that.
Well, it was a pleasure talking with you.
So today we tackled the seismic shift in American politics, where emotional rhetoric has eclipsed a focus on policy. We've talked about the weaponization of religion and Race to the Strategic Marketing of Martyrs like Charlie Kirk. They reveal how political movements are engineered to bypass logic and appeal directly to a voter's feelings. This conversation highlights the challenges facing a democracy built on reason when it's governed by emotion. And it calls into question, what is the future of democracy? And will it depend on whether we can bridge the gap between policy and emotion? So I'd love to hear what you think. How can we win back hearts and minds? Share your thoughts with us on social media using the hashtag Let's Talk Democracy. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode, where we'll continue our mission of building a more robust and resilient democracy, one conversation at a time. Talk with you soon.